They say thunderstorms can be calming, the sound of rain, the flash of lightning, that deep rumble that makes you feel safe inside your home. But that night, the storm didn't feel peaceful. It felt alive. And when I heard a woman crying beneath my window, I learned that some storms don't just pass, they follow you. This happened only a few weeks ago. And even though I'd like to think it's over, deep down I know something about it still isn't right. I don't live in the middle of nowhere, but my house sits on the edge of a quiet, nature-filled suburb. There are trees everywhere, wildlife wandering around, and that strange calm that comes from being just far enough away from everything. On one side of our house, there's a small patch of woods. Not big enough to get lost in, but large enough to hide the next road over. If you walk through it, you reach a narrow road that connects to another street, and across that road is this massive body of water. I've been curious about it since I was a kid. The weird thing is, it's fenced off, covered in no trespassing and government property signs. Everyone around here says it's some kind of reservoir, but there's something off about it. It doesn't show up on Google Maps, not on Apple Maps either. Nothing, and that alone, always felt wrong. If it were a real reservoir, it would be listed. I've searched online so many times over the years, but there's never been a single mention. It's like it doesn't exist. My siblings and I used to joke about it when we were younger, but as I got older, it started to bother me. I'm on varsity cross country at school, so I run a lot. That wooded area became my favorite route, a perfect 2-mile loop through the trees, past the fenced-off water, and back home. It's peaceful. No cars, no people. Just the sound of my feet and the wind in the leaves. One evening before a thunderstorm rolled in, I went out for a quick run. Near the end of my route, I heard something behind me. Just a soft, rustling sound, like something brushing through the leaves. Probably an animal, I thought, nothing strange. But that night, everything changed. The storm came fast, lightning flashing, thunder shaking the house, rain pounding against the windows. It was loud, but somehow comforting. I always sleep with my window open during summer, and that night was no exception. The air smelled like wet soil and pine. I was drifting off to the rhythm of rain, until I heard something that didn't belong. At first, it sounded like soft crying, faint, almost blending with the storm. But it didn't stop. It grew clearer, closer. And soon, I realized, it was coming from right beneath my bedroom window. It was definitely a woman. I could hear her sobbing through the rain. And then I heard her say, in this weak, trembling voice, "Can you help me?" I'm cold. I jumped out of bed. Not out of fear, but instinct. I didn't stop to think. I just ran. Down the stairs, out the front door, straight through the pouring rain. Within seconds, I was soaked, but I didn't care. Someone needed help. As I rounded the corner, my heart stopped. There, crouched just beneath my window, was a woman in a long white gown. Maybe a dress, maybe a nightgown. It was hard to tell through the rain. She was curled up, shivering, trying to hide under the small overhang. I called out to her, asking if she was okay. But before I could get close, she suddenly stood up and charged straight at me. It happened so fast I couldn't move. My brain froze. My body locked in place. But just before she reached me, she stopped. It was like something inside her changed her mind. She turned slightly, then bolted toward the woods, barefoot, running faster than I thought possible. I stood there, rain pouring down my face, watching her vanish into the dark. And in that moment, it felt like my world stopped. I didn't chase her. I ran back inside, still dripping water onto the floor, and woke up my dad. When I told him what happened, he could tell I wasn't making it up. We locked every door and window, checked every corner of the house. We talked about calling the police, but it was past midnight. By the time they showed up, she'd be long gone, and no one was going to search a forest in the middle of a thunderstorm. Eventually, I fell asleep again, but I couldn't shake what I saw. The next few days were normal, too normal. My dad said it was probably a homeless woman looking for shelter or someone having a breakdown. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But about a week later, during one of my runs, I saw her again. The day was bright and quiet. When I got to the road by the fenced reservoir, I glanced toward the water and froze. She was sitting there, right at the edge of the water, feet dangling in, her head tilted slightly down. Her hair was dripping wet, sticking to her face. The fence between us was 10 feet high, topped with barbed wire. There was no way she could have gotten inside. But she was there. I stopped running, didn't move, didn't breathe. Then, slowly, she turned her head toward me, and that's when I knew it was the same woman from that night. Her face twisted into this wide, unnatural smile. Then she ran, straight at the fence. When she reached it, she pressed her face right up against the chain links, smiling that same awful smile. I shouted that I was calling the police. For a second, she just stood there. Then, without warning, she turned and dived straight into the water. The splash echoed through the woods. I just stood there, shaking. I called 911 right away and told them everything. When the police arrived, she was gone. They searched the area, found nothing. One of the officers said they'd investigate, but I could tell they didn't believe me. After that, I started hearing things again. Soft sounds outside my window at night, footsteps on wet grass, twigs snapping, sometimes even quiet breathing. It wasn't crying anymore. It was worse. It felt like she was back, watching. I told my dad, but every time he went to check, there was nothing. I stopped running after that. I couldn't go near those woods. I couldn't even look toward that fence anymore. The strangest part, there's no way in, no holes, no broken links, nothing. That entire fence is sealed tight. So how did she get inside? My cousin Nick, he's one of those conspiracy guys, thinks that water isn't just a reservoir. He says it might be something secret, something hidden. I laughed at first. But honestly, the more I think about it, the less I laugh. Because if it's not listed anywhere, not mapped, not documented, then what is it? And who was she? Sometimes when thunder rolls in again and the rain starts tapping against my window, I swear I hear her voice just barely over the storm. Can you help me? I'm cold and I freeze every time. Because if I move, if I even breathe too loud, I know she'll be right there, waiting just outside the glass. I'll just say it. I'm a middle-aged man with a marriage that's barely holding together. My wife and I fight constantly. Sometimes I can't even remember what starts it. It's always over something small, something stupid. That night was no different. Words turned into shouting. And like so many times before, I ended up walking out the door, furious and tired. Usually when this happens, I cool off in a cheap hotel for the night. But this time, I didn't want her to find me. I needed real space, somewhere completely out of reach. There's this piece of property I own way out of town, middle of nowhere. I bought it a few years ago without really knowing what to do with it. I think it used to be a shooting range or something industrial. The old owner passed away and his family just wanted to get rid of it, so I got it cheap. The building itself is strange. A thick concrete block with a few warehouse-like rooms on the ground floor and an office upstairs. It's bigger than it looks from the outside, but quiet, empty, and isolated. Perfect for disappearing for a night. I grabbed my keys and drove out there. The further I got from the city, the darker and emptier the roads became. Somewhere along the drive, I noticed the clouds thickening ahead of me. By the time I reached the place, thunder was rolling across the sky, low and heavy. Rain started to fall just as I parked in the cracked old lot. I found the spare keys I keep tucked behind a piece of loose siding and let myself in. The moment I stepped inside, the storm picked up hard. The roof was metal, and the sound of rain hitting it was deafening, like handfuls of gravel being thrown down nonstop. I didn't mind though. Upstairs in the old office, there's a small cot I'd left there from before. It's not exactly comfortable, but it's better than the floor. I settled in, sat for a bit, and for the first time in weeks, I actually felt calm. The steady rain, the distance from everything. It almost felt peaceful. The storm made the world outside feel far away. For a while, that was enough. But peace doesn't last. Not for me. Just as I started drifting toward sleep, the sound of breaking glass shattered through the noise of the storm. It was sharp, close, and real. My heart started racing instantly. I froze, listening, trying to tell where it came from. But all I could hear was the pounding rain. After maybe 30 seconds of silence, I moved. I keep a rifle in one of the back rooms, mostly because my wife doesn't know I have it. I grabbed it, trying to make as little noise as possible, and started down the stairs. The storm was roaring, thunder echoing through the empty building. When I reached the bottom, I stopped, listening again. Nothing but the storm. No movement, no voice, no footsteps. I decided to check every room one by one. I moved slow, careful, keeping the rifle ready. Most of the rooms were empty, just dusty walls, old boxes, and the occasional creak. Then, in the back corner room, I found it. One of the boarded-up windows had a hole in it. The glass inside was shattered, tiny pieces scattered across the floor. But that was it. The hole was too small for anyone to climb through. No footprints, no sign of anyone entering. I told myself it was probably kids, maybe vandals passing by who threw a rock for fun. The area is pretty deserted, but you never know. I found a piece of cardboard and some duct tape, covered the hole, and went back upstairs. I kept the rifle next to the cot just in case, but deep down I figured it was nothing. An hour passed, maybe more. The storm outside kept pounding, but I was starting to doze again. That's when I heard it, faint but clear. Footsteps, slow, careful steps, coming from the floor below. At first, I thought I imagined it. I held my breath, listening. The steps were quiet but steady, as if someone was trying to move under the sound of rain. My hands went cold. I grabbed the rifle and crept to the top of the stairs. I didn't go down this time. I just waited, trying to see if the noise would continue, but it stopped. I stayed frozen for what felt like forever. 5, maybe 10 minutes, barely breathing. Nothing. Not even a floorboard creak. Eventually, I worked up the nerve to search again. I swept through every room, light to light, corner to corner, but there was nothing. No one. Not a sound besides the storm. At that point, I started questioning myself. Maybe the thunder and rain made me imagine it. Old buildings make all kinds of noises when they get hit by wind and water. I told myself that was it, just the storm messing with my head. But when I went back upstairs, something inside me still felt wrong. I sat on the cot, clutching the rifle, just staring at the wall, waiting for anything. Then it happened again. A sound I'll never forget. It wasn't footsteps this time. It was the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor below me. Slow, scraping, steady. There's no mistaking that sound. No wind or storm could make it. That's when my fear turned into anger. I jumped up, grabbed the rifle tight, and stormed downstairs, flicking on every light switch I could find. My voice echoed through the halls as I shouted, warning whoever was there that I was armed and not afraid to use the gun. My words bounced off the concrete walls and faded away into the sound of rain. No reply. Nothing had been moved. Every piece of furniture was exactly where it had been. The silence that followed made my skin crawl. You might think I should have called the police at that point, but honestly, I didn't know what I'd even say. The property isn't exactly legal to live in, not up to code, to put it lightly. I didn't want to draw attention to it, so I stood there, heart pounding, staring into the dark corners of that building, trying to convince myself I wasn't losing it. Then, all at once, something changed. I don't know how to explain it, but the air shifted, the temperature dropped, and I felt this cold, crawling wave of fear move through me like ice water. My chest tightened, and every instinct screamed at me to leave. Not later, not soon, now. It wasn't logic. It was pure, instinctive terror, the kind that hits before you can think. I didn't wait. I grabbed my stuff, tucked the rifle back in its place, and shut off all the lights. Outside, the storm was still raging, but I didn't care. I locked up and ran to my truck. The rain hit so hard it was blinding, but I drove anyway, fast, pushing through the flooded roads until I finally reached home. My hands were shaking the entire time. That night has been stuck in my head ever since. It's been a few weeks now, and part of me wants to go back. Maybe set up cameras or some motion sensors just to prove something was really there. Maybe it was just the weather playing tricks on me. Or maybe someone actually was hiding in that building and managed to stay unseen. But there's another thought, one I try not to think about. Because if it wasn't a person and it wasn't my imagination, then I don't know what it was. And honestly, that's what scares me the most. My name's Jason, and I live in a quiet, rural area where everything interesting is at least a half-hour drive away. What I'm about to tell you happened just 3 Fridays ago. My friend Leo and I had driven out to a small house party a few towns over. It wasn't anything crazy, more like one of those chill backyard hangouts where people play beer pong, talk too loud, and blast music from a Bluetooth speaker. To be honest, it was kind of a college-type vibe, but there's not much else to do where I'm from. I was the designated driver that night, so I'd been slowly sipping the same beer for 3 hours, while Leo was getting drunker by the minute. He gets that way sometimes. Loud, emotional, and overly deep about random things. By the time we left, it was past 1 a.m, and I realized I was going to have to babysit him all the way home. After finally pulling him away from a girl he was flirting with, I managed to drag him to my car for the 20-something minute drive back. But the weather had gone bad while we were at the party. What started as a soft drizzle had turned into a full-on storm. The rain came down so hard, I could barely see 30 feet ahead of the car. Normally, I'd drive those empty country roads fast, but I had to slow down to 30 miles an hour just to stay safe. Leo, of course, wouldn't stop complaining. First, it was my driving, then the music, then how bad he needed to pee. I told him we were about 15 minutes from home, tops, but that didn't stop him from whining nonstop. Eventually, I'd had enough. I pulled over on this lonely stretch of road next to what looked like a cornfield. Though it was hard to tell in the dark with all that rain. There weren't any houses or streetlights, just miles of empty farmland on both sides. I told Leo he could get soaked if he wanted, but I wasn't stopping again. He didn't even wait for me to finish talking before stumbling out of the car. He practically fell onto the wet gravel and staggered off toward the field. Within seconds, he vanished into the darkness. The rain was pounding so hard that after 10 feet I couldn't see him at all. That's when I remembered there was an umbrella in my back seat. I sat for a moment, watching the windshield wipers struggle, and figured I might as well take the chance to go too. I grabbed the umbrella, locked the car out of habit, and walked a short distance in the opposite direction from Leo. I stopped near the edge of the gravel, right where the road met the field. The rain hitting the umbrella made it hard to hear anything, but I could have sworn I heard something moving near the car. It wasn't just the storm sounds. This was different, like footsteps or rustling. Without turning all the way around, I glanced over my shoulder. The headlights illuminated only the shiny black road and falling rain. I didn't see anything, and since the doors were locked and the keys were in my pocket, I brushed it off. When I headed back a few minutes later, Leo still wasn't there. I waited. A few more minutes passed, then 5, then another 5. Still nothing. I started getting annoyed. What should have been a quick drive home was turning into a 45-minute ordeal, and I had to get up early in the morning. I was about to honk the horn when I caught movement in the side mirror. Leo came running toward the car, sprinting like he was being chased. Even through the rain and darkness, I could tell something had seriously scared him. The moment he threw the door open, he started screaming at me to drive. He didn't even close the door before shouting it. I didn't need to be told twice. Instinct took over, and I hit the gas, trying to get us out of there, even though the road was slick and vision was terrible. Leo was shaking, breathing fast, and talking so quickly I could barely understand him. Between the noise of the rain and his panicked tone, it took a while to piece together what he was saying. He told me that while he was peeing, he saw what he thought was me standing in the field off to his right. The person looked about my height and was walking deeper into the crops. Leo thought I was playing some kind of prank, so he followed. He said he called out to me, but the person didn't respond. They just kept walking further and further into the dark field. It wasn't until the figure suddenly turned around that Leo realized it wasn't me. He couldn't make out a face or details. It was too dark, but he knew right away that he was following a complete stranger. He turned and ran back toward the car as fast as he could. As he was finishing the story, the car jerked sharply to the right, and I heard the unmistakable thump of a flat tire. My heart sank. The last thing we needed was to be stranded out here. I tried to keep driving, but the car was pulling too hard. I had no choice but to stop. We were maybe half a mile from where we'd pulled over before, which didn't make me feel much better. Frustrated, I told Leo to get out and help me fix the tire, since his little adventure probably got us into this mess. But when I walked around to the back, my anger disappeared instantly. My hands went cold. There, stuck deep in the side of the rear passenger tire, was a screwdriver. It wasn't a coincidence. Someone had jammed it in there with force. There was no other way it could have gotten lodged that deep. Leo started freaking out again, asking who would do something like that, but I snapped at him to stay calm. We worked together to change the tire, both shaking and rushing. With the rain pounding so hard it felt like needles on my skin. I tried not to think about who had sabotaged my car or whether they were still nearby. Every minute that passed made my chest tighten. My hands were trembling so bad I nearly dropped the wrench twice. Just as I was finishing up tightening the last lug nut, a scream tore through the sound of the storm. It was distant but sharp, and it was definitely a woman's voice. That alone made it worse, because Leo had said the person he saw was a man. We froze. The scream came again, echoing faintly through the rain. Leo looked at me, eyes wide, and I didn't say a word. I threw the tools in the trunk, didn't even bother securing the spare, and jumped back into the car. Leo followed, still yelling that we needed to help whoever that was. But all I could think about was getting away. I slammed the door, started the engine, and sped off, ignoring the way the car shook on the wet road. Leo grabbed my arm, shouting that we couldn't just leave someone out there. He said they might be hurt or worse. I told him I didn't care. I wasn't going back. Deep down, I felt awful for saying it, but my fear was stronger than my guilt. Leo called 911 while I drove, giving them rough directions to where we'd been. He was angry the whole time, calling me a coward and saying someone could be dying because of me. I didn't answer him. I just kept driving, gripping the wheel tighter than I ever had before. When we finally got home, I pulled into my driveway and turned off the car. The rain was still pounding outside, and neither of us spoke for a minute. Instead of dropping Leo off, we just sat there, trying to make sense of everything. Leo was convinced that the scream belonged to someone being attacked or chased by the same figure he'd seen in the field. He felt guilty, like we had run away and left someone to die, but I didn't see it that way. I couldn't stop thinking about that screwdriver. If someone was out there hurting another person, why would they waste time puncturing a random car's tire? That made no sense. You wouldn't want to risk being caught by doing something like that. And if a woman really was in trouble, she would have seen our headlights when we were pulled over the first time. Why wait until we were driving away to start screaming? None of it added up. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that the scream was part of a trap. Maybe there were more than one of them. Someone lured Leo into the field. Someone sabotaged the car. And someone else screamed to draw us back. Even saying it out loud sounded crazy, but it made more sense than anything else. Still, when I replayed the night in my head, even that theory fell apart. Who would plan something like that out there on a random rural road in the middle of a thunderstorm? It wasn't like there were houses or even power lines nearby. Nobody could have known we'd stop there. The whole thing just didn't fit together. Leo and I argued back and forth until the sun started coming up. In the end, we agreed to disagree. I tried to sleep, but I couldn't stop hearing that scream over and over. The next morning, I called the local police station to ask if they'd found anything after Leo's 911 call. The officer said they'd searched the area thoroughly, but hadn't found any sign of anyone being there. No tracks, no dropped belongings, nothing. Even weirder, they hadn't found my flat tire either, the one I'd left on the side of the road. That part really got to me. How does a full tire just disappear overnight? Leo later came up with another theory that honestly made my skin crawl. He thought maybe it wasn't the man who punctured the tire, it was the woman. Maybe she was the one out there, trying to get someone to stop. Maybe she used the screwdriver to make us pull over, hoping we'd help. Why she'd do that instead of scream for help right away? I'll never know. But that idea sat with me longer than I wanted it to. If he's right, that means we might have driven away from someone who desperately needed help that night. I can't even begin to imagine what happened after we left. And honestly, I don't want to. Every time it storms now, I think about that road, that field, and how something or someone was waiting out there in the dark.